Pokémon Platinum is regarded by fans as one of the best games in the series. And today I'm going to be analyzing and judging the game to see if that's actually true. But I have a really embarrassing fact to share with you first. Up until a month ago, I never played Pokémon Platinum. And, yeah. Now, we're going to break this up into 9 parts, one for each gym leg, plus the Elite Four. And within each section of the game, I'll be sharing my thoughts on available Pokemon, gym leaders, Team Galactic, Rival, and anything else that stands out in that section. After all this, we're then going to put the whole analysis together. And we'll look at why. Despite Platinum having quite a few issues, there is one thing that completely saves the game and makes it truly incredible. Badge 1. Setting the stage. So hopping into Gen 4 as a Gens 1 to 3 fanboy is a very surreal experience. At the time, I imagine new fans just looked at this with simple appreciation, but I'm just shocked to see what is the amalgamation of 3 generations over 9 years and 8 iterations of Pokemon games. Things feel familiar, but so much more refined. You're introduced to the Pokemon professor, you name your rival, you head out of your small town and are blocked by a random NPC, talk to someone to then be allowed to leave, and swiftly pick your starter. But the first thing that stands out to me are how extremely charming the graphics feel. They're reminiscent of Gen 3, but the art has been improved on enough that it's found its own identity. Also, the music is an absolute vibe from the start. And while I love Gen 3, I welcome the end of the Horn era as we enter the age of immaculate vibes, fat basslines, and Euro trance bangers. Wow. Oh yeah, also, if you want to watch my full playthrough, just started a new channel, SmithPlays Plus, has that full video, link in the description after this one though. Anyway, what's probably the biggest talking point to the journey of your first badge is, as always, this starter selection. While I may have never played the Gen 4 Sinnoh games, I certainly have the knowledge to see that Chimchar is the strongest starter. And yet despite that, I'm so impressed of what a good job Gen 4 does of making the starter selection a difficult choice. Sure, it is the second firefighting type in a row, and that's why I'm not gonna use it, but it's still awesome. Overall, grass type has been a pretty big underperformer outside of Venusaur, but I know that with Earthquake, the Turtwig line also goes insanely hard. Unfortunately though, I already had plans to scoop up another ground type, so that left me with Piplup. Empoleon is both the only steel starter, along with the only water steel type in all of Pokemon. So I was just really curious to see how this Pokemon actually played in practice. And while I love the line from a design standpoint, you're probably going to come to find me not loving it maybe as much as you hoped, but we'll get back to that. Anyway, with a female Piplup who we name Victoria, we take the expected first rival fights and it goes very slowly, but we eventually get the dub. And after this, it's just sort of time for your standard early game stuff. Head to the first town, head back home, pick up a package, deliver it to Barry, catching tutorial, and boom, look at that. It's a new city, time to be free of tutorials, just kidding. Gotta be honest, not really a fan of Jubilife. This is the first time the game forces you to do Pokemon school stuff, which makes me realize this is sort of the dawn of the Pokemon community's hatred of, I guess honestly the word I gotta use is hand-holding, as much as that's an overused term in Pokemon. It's just like, as a seasoned player, being forced to answer questions of like, do Pokemon moves have types, or do Pokemon gain experience, is not very fun. Also, you can catch Pokemon before the catching tutorial, and even if you have a second Pokemon in your party, you're forced to do it. And so I ended up leaving Jubilife with just the impression that this is the tutorial city. And honestly, that opinion never changed over the course of my playthrough. Now, the first Pokemon that I caught was a Bidoof, because let's be honest, everybody knows that Gen 4 HMs are a problem. And even my dad knows that Bidoof is the best unpaid HM intern in Sinnoh. Now, as we make our way towards the first gym town, we have a second rival fight, which felt very reminiscent of the 1B rival fight in Kanto. This one was also very slow. From here though, I was actually really impressed with the fights up until the gym leader. So usually early game fights are really boring with like 2 to 3 supremely underleveled Pokemon. But I think for the first time ever, Platinum at least makes the decision to give trainers one single fairly good leveled Pokemon, and that makes swap grinding all your brand new Pokemon just so much easier, which was seriously helpful for the first member of my team. Sorry, but I got a Starly. Look, I know it's basic, but to me, Starly was like the new cool drug on the street that everyone was doing, and my curiosity got the best of me. I thought, sure, I'll give it a try, see what the Starly hype is all about, and then I'll drop it. Easy as that. Fortunately, I would go on to become another victim of Staraptor hype. This thing is just like, it doesn't give you an opportunity for you to let it go. Because anytime you're like, yeah, I'm gonna drop this, like 5 levels before that, it just gets a new awesome thing that you're like, why would I ever drop this Pokemon? The first instance of that being level 9 wing attack. Like, I'm sorry, what? This is such a crazy power spike, but it's also so well balanced because once you get it, all the following Pokemon are like rock type, so it's not even overpowered, but it just forces you to like keep the Pokemon. Now, the last notable part of the early game is, of course, Gym 1 Rourke. And I gotta say, what? Oh my god, this fight is so hard. I saw the lead Geodude and I was going into this fight thinking, okay, this is Roxanne 2.0, but Cranidos is gonna pack a little more punch than Nosepass. Wrong. Sure, Geodude is a free one-tap, but even Onix didn't go down to a single bubble, and this thing knows Stealth Rocks? But the fact that his ace has Headbutt and Pursuit, you can't safely swap, you can't really safely fight this thing, which I learned the hard way, getting my first loss at the very first gym. Quick Claw Torrents? Dude, what the hell? That is a rock gym. To start out, that is not a pushover. Wow. Now, I absolutely love the power of this Pokemon, but I'm gonna do the game design thing for 1 second. Bear with me. I think having a weak but really high power Pokemon as the first gym makes a ton of sense. But when that Pokemon's main move also has a 30% chance to flinch, it basically turns the fight into an RNG fest. Second fight I won because I just dodged 2 flinches in a row, but had that not happened, I would have lost again and had to restart and just get lucky off of no flinches. I just don't think the game gives you a lot to play around flinch, and because of that, it's a little bit too much for the first gym. Despite my grievances though, I absolutely take this over a super boring Gym 1, and Rourke is by far the most interesting Gym 1 leader to this point in the series. So all things considered, I was feeling very optimistic. Badge 2. The real story begins. Now, before leaving Rourkstown, I also caught a Ponyta because I was curious to try it out for the upcoming grass gym. You also get access to explore the north part of the cave you pass through to get to Orbor, and it was a total dud. Like, I think this was done pretty awkwardly. They teased this new area that is like only passable by Rock Smash, and then you get to that new area and it's like, haha, psych, all the good stuff is actually locked behind Surf. But after returning to Jubilife, the first real beat of Badge 2 is your first encounter with the game's evil group, Team Galactic. This is a double battle with Dawn that feels like another guardrail fight, but it's a good introduction. From here, we pass through Floroma and then get our first real encounter with Galactic. And oh man, does it leave an impact. You do some more walking around and get your typical grunt fights in, and it sets the team vibe up like you can expect for, any other Pokemon game. You're fighting Zubats, Clammeows, just classic feeling evil team Pokemon. It's also around this time where the game starts placing like an absurdly high amount of pressure to use the honey system. It's like they introduce a new feature and then they dedicate an entire town to getting you to use that feature. But then chat was very quick to tell me like the feature sucks. There's a 1% chance for a Munchlax and everything else is awful. Takes like 6 hours per encounter. This is stupid. I'm not gonna deal with it. And so that is exactly what I did. Instead, I went to go get my head kicked in by a really chunky cat. The climax of the Valley Windworks arc is the fight against Commander Mars. And wow, this is perhaps the first time in the series that a team executive can actually fight you back. Thinking back to the lows of Gen 2's unevolved Houndour guy as the final fight in the game, or any of Team Aqua or Magma's executives, this is crazy. Her Ugly is just so much stronger than anything you have access to here, and it forces you to use your whole team in a very interesting way. And for the early game, this is a huge win for Team Plasma because it sets them up to be a real threat and raises your expectations of what's to come. Now, it was also at this point where my Starly evolves and digs its talons further into my soul. Turns out, not just Staraptor, but also Staravia learns Intimidate. From the perspective of an early gen fan that has just been conditioned over time to expect the worst and never thinking your Pokemon is gonna actually get what it needs, I feel like I've been living my whole life as a peasant and just randomly married into some royal family. The game just spoils you. Primplup gets Metal Claw on evolution. Ponyta, who is a physical attacker, gets the physical attacking move Flame Wheel at 15. We were even playing the section on Friday, so we were able to pick up the Drifloon that I would go on to never use, but it's still very cool. Now, the next event from here is the Eterna Forest walkthrough, where you play double battles with another NPC who only has a Chansey. Gonna be honest, this was not very fun. I like that she heals you, and I respect the risk, but it's just very slow and boring. We then make it to Eterna City and finally meet Cynthia. What did I do to deserve this cruel fate? I was memeing super hard on stream, so I don't actually know what she said, but it is nice to see the champion showing their face early. Even if you've never fought her, Cynthia has such a reputation, and something about seeing her this early just instantly instills a sense of fear, because it doesn't matter how far away she might be in the game. From the moment I meet her, we're now in the big boy leagues, and no matter what you do through this playthrough, you are eventually going to be staring her face to face in the champions room. And from here, this takes us to the second gym leader, Gardenia. First thing I want to note is like, wow, what a step up in gym design. That is a beautiful looking gym. It is a great looking puzzle. Gen 3 to Gen 4 is just a wide open chasm in terms of quality. Now, as for the fight itself, I found it pretty easy, but the difficulty came down to having both a fire and flying Pokemon. But from a more objective standpoint, Gardenia has a really well thought out design. Like second gym, she's got a Turtwig lead running Reflect and Sunny Day. This then flows into Cherrim, which has the signature ability Flower Gift that increases its attack and special defense in Sun. Like, damn, Bugsy, Misty, and Brawly could never. And then she's got her ace Roserade, which just has really good stats by the second gym. It's like as this run is going on, I'm just becoming more and more impressed with Platinum's ability to give you cool experiences. And overall, I thought this section of the game was very strong. It starts and ends with two really challenging fights, and even the route to Eterna Forest is pretty solid. Sure, Eterna Forest is a miss, but at least it's a miss in a risk. So overall, I think the path to Badge 2 is really solid. Badge 3, the early game crescendo. After the second badge, we're faced with another run-in with Team Galactic. There's a lot of optional fights here, but what stands out again is the really tough fight with the newly introduced Commander Jupiter. This commander has the dark poison type Skuntank, which is just like a crazy typing because its only weakness is ground. Like, who has ground types at this point of the game? I'll tell you, not me. It was also running Night Slash, so I was just completely terrified as I was using Growl strats to lower its attack. It was just a really fun fight and just kind of further cemented the fact like you gotta take Team Flare very seriously. Also after this, we gained access to the Grand Underground, which was also a thing in BDSP, and this is kind of like a toned back version where you can't catch Pokemon, but you can get really cool items. I like it as like a fun little side hobby thing, but the fact that like some items are kind of locked behind this that like prevent access to certain evolutions before the post game, thought that was kind of lame. Still though, like this is just a feature that is so beyond anything Gen 3 even had. So overall, I still respect the feature. Now, as far as team building goes at this point, I'm feeling very happy with Primplup and Staravia. At the start of the game, the professor gave me Return, which I taught to Staravia, and that's up to like 60 base power now. So not only do I have Wing Attack, but another just solid neutral damage stab move. As for Ponyta, it was really useful in the first fight, but its light evolution and sort of unimpressive moveset after this had me end up dropping it. Which takes us to Cycling Road and the following stretch of routes to the next city. There's not much new here in the way of experimental features, but I think its biggest source of identity comes from Wayward Cave's hidden entrance, home to the pseudo-legendary Gibble. Okay, guys, look, I know what you're thinking. Staraptor and Garchomp, really, Pat? I already passed on Infernape, Roserade, Luxray. I gotta get a little basic for my first Platinum run. Gibble is also an important Pokemon to me because like a year ago, I made a video talking about why pseudo-legendaries are really poorly designed. And in that video, I say that Gibble's design is actually perfect. You're also probably wondering, how have you made these every game videos if you've never played Gen 4 Sinnoh? And that's where a lovely team comes in. Craig is sort of the production end of it, and he will help me with scripts whenever we're talking about this game because I don't know about it. And so we kind of formulated this idea together, like even not having played it, I just saw what Gibble is. I saw what the line is and was like, yeah, that's gonna be good in the game. Craig obviously like approved that idea and agreed with it, but I just felt the need to like put those ideas to the test. Something I didn't really account for personally though is the fact that Platinum also gives you access to Earthquake in this cave. Like, this is just so far beyond what the other games gave you. So yeah, I'm gonna pick up an early pseudo. Yeah, I'm gonna strap it with Earthquake. And guess what? It wasn't even that overpowered. Now, as we arrive in Hearthome, I also pick up the gift Eevee, and this gives us access to every evolution except for Glaceon, which is kind of weird considering that's one of the only 2 new evolutions. Yeah, the Snowstone thing isn't available till like after the 6th gym. So the only new option for me of evolution was Leafeon, which is a Pokemon I've never used or even battled against for that matter. Now, when it comes to grass types, I'm a little skeptical. That was until I looked at Leafeon's stats, because as it turns out, arguably one of the best distributed stats for an evolution. Leafeon has its 130 stat in defense, while its attack is 110. The big thing though is it has a 95 stat in speed, so it can outspeed pretty much everything you need it to. Combining this with the fact that its impish nature further raised its defense and lowered its special attack, which is the one stat you're not going to use on a Leafeon, dude, I was ready to board the Leafeon hype train. Straight into Fantina, where my first fight was an absolute wash. I went in blind and her Miss Magia straight up murdered me. For my second attempt, I caught a Bibarel with Rolo to take down her Duskull and leave my main team unpaired. I then ended up having Victoria land a lucky crit to take out Miss Magius, and then Leafeon was able to just swoop in and completely wall out her physically attacking Haunter until I got the win. So yeah, we got the win, but like, what? People talk about Whitney being the hardest gym leader of all time, but I genuinely think that that title might go to Platinum Fantina. Like, compared to Whitney's Miltank, it just feels like Miss Magius has no counters. And that might be because it was my first playthrough, but I'm shocked. It has grass coverage for water, rock, and ground types, psychic coverage for poison and fighting types, and then Ghost just gives her neutral damage to everything else on like a 105 special attack when you're running a bunch of first stagers. And honestly, I love it. Anytime that I have the opportunity to get my ass handed to me in a vanilla Pokemon game is like an absolute win of a day for me. And I genuinely think that this was the moment I fell in love with Sinnoh. Sure, is my first playthrough, it might be my honeymoon phase, but it's just been so good so far. The first 3 badges of Sinnoh are probably the best Pokemon experience I've ever had in the franchise. And by the 3rd gym, my hope of Platinum being the great game people said it is growing. Maybe, just maybe, the game isn't hyped around nostalgia. Badge 4, the world opens up. Now, just like most Pokemon games, it's around the 4th gym when you reach the big city and the world opens up in a bunch of ways. In Platinum, Veilstone first opens up the game with access to the department store selling the Blizzard class of TMs. Now, in the same vein as early Earthquake, my gut response was that this is crazy, but after a bit of time running Blizzard on my Primplup, it really wasn't that OP. It was nice having early Blizzard, but you quickly realize that Game Freak's earlier ways of reserving these moves for the end of the game was way too conservative. Outside of Fire Blast, these moves are just way too inconsistent to be overpowered, so I think it was a nice change of pace. You've also got a bunch of routes that open up, giving you access to new TMs like Aerial Ace along with the Heart Scale for the move tutor. I ended up using both of these on Leafeon to give it some really high damage flying coverage along with relearning Razor Leaf. I think the big turnoff of Leafeon is that it doesn't get its big Leaf Blade until like level 70 when you've probably already beat the game. And a lot of people were telling me not to use it for that reason, but 100 attack on Stab Razor Leaf ended up actually being more than enough for almost every situation. And so after this team building session, we reached Maylene, the 4th gym leader. First of all, while annoying, the gym puzzle is very cool. Maylene leads with a not weak to psychic moves Meditite that uses Rock Tomb to cover its flying weaknesses. But even considering the damage it did to my Staravia was after and intimidates, I think it felt a little bit weak. Like, Meditite does have great attack, but by the 4th gym, I was just feeling like we probably should be moving on to fully evolved Pokemon. Machoke was also set up to be as good as it possibly could be, and it still left me a little bit disappointed. In contrast, Gardenia has a first first, middle stage, and final stager. So the fourth gym should probably be picking up a little bit more than this. The only challenging aspect of her fight is Lucario. Drain Punch works great to give it some much needed longevity, while Steel Fighting is just pretty tough to counter. But unfortunately, like, even this is a step down from Fantina's ace. So I don't think that Maylene is bad, but her fight definitely felt like a step down from the third badge. Now, looking through the Sinnoh decks, I will acknowledge that for the fourth badge, Fighting type is kind of in an awkward spot with what you could add to her team. Like, you can't really give her a Machamp or Medicham because that's just gonna rival Lucario. But it feels like a bit of an oversight where maybe they could have just raised the first two Pokemon levels or just add in a fourth Pokemon like Krogunk or maybe, I don't know, Heracross. The first three gyms have 3 Pokemon and the second and third has a first, middle, and final stage evolution. So I think it was a bit of a misstep to just repeat this a third time. So I finished the journey to my fourth badge feeling anxious towards the upcoming difficulty curve, but overall still optimistic. Badge 5. Losing focus. After the Maylene fight, I picked up a Porygon, and since I already had the upgrade, I traded it to evolve it into a Porygon 2. Wink. Now, I didn't have plans to invest in it or anything, but when you don't have a full team, it's really nice to just get a free Pokemon that's at a similar level as yours already to just throw in for some additional support at no cost. At this point, we also get Fly on Staravia, which I forgot is 90 power in Gen 4, so this thing is just doing amazing damage. Leafeon continues to surprise me as a rare physical wall that can also output massive damage and outspeed nearly everything. Like, seriously, I don't know if it's just me, but is Leafeon perhaps the most underrated evolution? Probably. Also, for my own sense of self-reassurance, I'm very happy to see Gabite performing exactly as I expected. Its attack and speed allow it to stay competitive, while its ground pairing stops Dragon from being too defensively OP. And because I had already explored all the areas around his gym, I move on to challenge Crasher Wake right away. Well, actually, first I evolved my Staravia into Staraptor, but then we go on to fight him. Now, in reference to what I said about Maylene, Crasher Wake takes the right steps to up the difficulty by finally making his team fully evolved. He's running Quagsire, Gyarados, and a Floatzel ace. Now, I didn't have an electric move because I was hoarding Shockwave like a weirdo, and that made the fight pretty hard, but I don't think this is indicative of most people's experience. You're always going to get Shockwave before this fight, which makes Gyarados just entirely free. Gardenia also gives you Grass Knot, which makes Quagsire a one-shot kill, and this paired with a Floatzel ace makes things a little bit awkward. I think Floatzel was designed to be a cleanup crew ace. The classic example of a cleanup crew ace is Manectric on Emerald Watson. It's not outright the strongest Pokemon that's gonna live forever, but because it has great speed and coverage, it's really good at carving into and finishing off an already weakened team. The issue with this fight though is that because his first 2 Pokemon can go down in one shot, Floatzel doesn't have the staying power to sweep a full team. And so Floatzel can't be a Goatzel. Yep, this is my job. Listen, I'm just gonna say it. The big issue is the G-Man. Gyarados is a really difficult Pokemon to balance. If you don't have an electric move, Gyarados is really strong. But if you do, it is just a complete non-entity in a fight. So which way do you balance the gym for? Exactly, that's the point. You can't know. And so Gyarados doesn't really work good on a team unless there's like 5+ Pokemon. I think this fight would be a lot better leading Golduck or a huge power Azumarill to showcase the physical special split. Quagsire makes perfect sense because grass is just less common than electric. Floatzel can also cover grass Pokemon, so Quagsire could stay on to neutralize electric types, and then Tentacruel, another Gen 1 Pokemon, could come out to deal with the grass types that killed Quagsire. This level of support would allow Floatzel's coverage priority build to actually excel at what it was built to do. Overall, this gym is just a little bit weird, and it's my assumption that Diamond and Pearl probably do it better. It's my understanding that Fantina's Gym 5 fight in Diamond and Pearl is harder than Wake's 5 in Platinum, and so I'm assuming that Diamond and Pearl gives you a more linear difficulty curve. That's unfortunately just an issue with map design, and so I see why they were trying to remediate the awkward way you moved around the Sinnoh in Diamond and Pearl, but then you kind of run into this issue where Fantina's with the Miss Magius is just really good, and she kind of outshines the next 2 gym leaders. Not an expert on these games, not an expert Pokemon designer, but from someone who knows a little bit about this, that's my take on why things are a little awkward between badge 3 and 5. And so after this, I was left with a sense of growing anxiety that maybe I had set my expectations on this game a little bit too high. Badge 6. Broken Promises. After the 5th badge, you have a brief Team Plasma event where you follow this dude around, and Cynthia hooks you up with some ibuprofen to get the Psyducks to move. I get it, Psyduck. I feel the same way sometimes. Unfortunately, the mental fog only grows worse as we step onto the next route. I don't have the number, but it's the defog route. And this is an interesting place to step into because I just know it as like the most contentious Sinnoh area amongst fans. Here, the fog lowers the accuracy of all moves unless you use the HM defog, and the community does not have a lot of love for this experimental section. It's actually probably the pinnacle of Gen 4 HM annoyance. Now, I chose to reject HMs to honor my 8-year-old cultural traditions, and honestly, I didn't find it all that bad. Because I had Leafeon with Aerial Ace, which doesn't have an accuracy loss, I was just kind of at an advantage throughout the entire route, and it really didn't go that bad for me. I could see that it would get annoying on subsequent playthroughs, but for me, I actually thought this was a much better experimental feature than the Eterna Forest fights. Then as you make it through here and reach Celestic Town, you get your first Cyrus fight, and it was honestly super disappointing. The commanders are built up in a way that gets you super wary of Cyrus, but this fight completely fell short of my expectations. It's crazy enough that he has 2 flying types on a team of 3, but to not even evolve his Murkrow or Sneasel is wild. Like, even if he had a Golbat, Honchkrow, and Weavile, this would have been easier than the first 2 commander fights, but at the very least, it would probably be in line with an upward trending difficulty curve. But the way this fight is presented just leaves you with a complete and utter lack of respect for who is meant to be the big bad of this game. It was also after the 5th badge that the game opens up to a bunch of side quests. I ended up making my way back to Valley Windworks to get Thunderbolts, and then headed to Fuego Ironworks to finally quell my curiosity and figure out what a Fuego Ironwork actually is. Ironwork? Yeah. I sure hope it does. Now, I actually ran into a Magnemite outside of this place, which I say as though it was a coincidence and not a direct result of me harassing my chat to find me another good team option. Magneton itself is really good, and I've never actually used Magnezone, so when I found out that I can get one and not have to wait until the 17th badge and evolve it with my DS held upside down at 4 AM, well, I was pretty excited. The excitement was yet again another case of being so conditioned by the early Pokemon games to expect disappointment. Next, we make our way to Canalave City, and we get our first fight where I would consider Barry to be actually somewhat decent. There's also the optional quest with Riley, the Lucario egg, and your trip to the Iron Islands. This was a much better double battle experience than Eterna Forest. I also like that this area had a bunch of Pokemon that are in that like high level, easy to kill, good stat experience yielding sort of space. Around the 6th gym is probably when you're gonna be like, I'm getting a little underleveled, I need some just like quick grinding, and this place offers you that perfectly. So with that, we end up getting Prinplup evolved into a Polion and make it to the 6th badge. Who is Byron? The Steel type leader and father of Rourke. Byron leads with a non-fully evolved Steel Electric type Magneton. This thing has some pretty good moves and it's well leveled, but with a 4 times weakness to ground, Byron's lead sees the exact same issue as Crasher Wake. His second Pokemon is Steelix, which doesn't have the 2-time weakness and has some really good stab moves with even Ice Fang to cover ground types. Steelix is unfortunately quite tragically vulnerable to water type attacks though, and it doesn't have much staying power either. And as for Bastiodon, I'm sorry, but it doesn't matter how much defense you have when you have a 4 times weakness to ground. For that matter, I didn't even need to use a ground type because water was more than enough to take it out. And all things considered, after this fight, I was just left with such a feeling of disappointment. Now, to be charitable, I'll at first say that at the very least, he has 3 Pokemon that have all been fully evolved stages at one point. But like still, why doesn't he have a Magnezone? If you go ahead with the major fights, there's no trainer that has a Magnezone on their team, so I don't know why this is the case. Like, is Magnezone really so hard that I'm expected to not be able to deal with it? You had no problem beating my ass into the dirt at the start of the game, but now you're choosing to lay off the gas? Why does he only have 3 Pokemon? Did you forget about Bronzong, Lucario, Probopass? This was your second opportunity to give the Steel Gym Leader a Scizor, and you flopped it again. Oh, and I'm sorry, but hello, what about Empoleon? A water type will be so useful here because it could cover fire and ground types. And on top of that, they've already shown a willingness to use starters on the major fights. It's actually extra weird because not only is Turtwig on the second gym team, but Infernape is in the league, so not including Empoleon feels exclusionary. Look, I'm trying to be charitable here, and I'm aware that the 4th and 5th gym faced very specific game design challenges for balancing, but there is no excuse here. Only Pokemon with valid reasons to not be here are Lucario, since it's Maylene's ace, and Bronzong, I guess, because it's on Lucian's team. Scizor's right here, never used in the game. Empoleon almost feels necessary, and I don't like Probopass, but you could have still included him on one fight. Byron's team shows a lack of coherence and makes me wonder if all the previous wins of Platinum were just accidental. Badge 7, the epic highs and lows of Team Galactic. And just when you thought the game's difficulty was on the floor, we enter what is probably the most disappointing part yet. We enter the next stage of the game with a cutscene of an explosion at one of the lakes. We then head to Lake Valor and take on our first fight against Commander Saturn. Reminiscent of Cyrus, this fight is once again disappointing when compared to the precedent set by the first two commanders. It's giving Team Aqua Magma, which is just classic evil team now of Golbat, Evolution reserved for another trainer fight, and extremely mid-ace. We then head to Lake Verity to take on Mars, and what do you know? It's another Golbat, non-evolved reserved evolution, and the same ace I defeated 5 badges and 30 levels ago. This section is ultimately so frustrating because there's just so much other cool stuff. Like, I love the design and naming of the commanders. I love the 3 lakes of Sinnoh. I love this event. I also love that after this, I go to some random hole in the ground, pick up a Dawnstone, and evolve my brand new and 6th team member, Snorunt. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, the moment you've all been waiting for. Our 6th and final Pokemon is yet another Gen 4 icon, Frostlass. What's something that Gen 4 did right? I'll tell you, it's fast ice types. Whether this is your first or 50th Platinum run, once you hit the mid-game, every player feels the exact same way. You're staring down a long hallway filled with various trainers, and at the very end of that hallway, through all those people, there is one Pokemon staring you down. However far away it still is, you've made enough progress to establish a line of sight with Cynthia's Garchomp. And there is nothing that is going to break that line of sight until you finally face it and defeat it. And it is this fact that elevates fast ice types beyond anything we have seen before. And so after a long journey through the brutal Sinnoh winter, we make it to Candace, the 7th gym leader, with our finally completed team. Victoria the Empoleon, Boreas the Staraptor, Legolas the Leafeon, Mjolnir the Magnezone, Muad'Dib the Gabite, and finally, Araume the Frostlass. And can I just say, thank God for Candace. Candace, my nut. It feels so good to be faced with a trainer that actually makes me consider strategy. I know this wasn't the case in Diamond and Pearl, and Candace had an awful team there, but in Platinum, Frostlass is such a threat that it puts the pressure on regardless of what team you bring. And that is the hallmark of a great fight. My only critique here is, again, just the lack of evolved Pokemon. Like, the first Cyrus fight doesn't have a Weavile, and we'll soon find out that the second one doesn't have a Weavile either. So surely Candace could have had a Weavile, and I don't know, maybe they were just wanting to save Weavile for Cyrus, which, like, fair enough, but then why wouldn't you evolve Piloswine into Mamoswine? Mamoswine is one of the coolest Pokemon ever, and it's never featured in the mainline part of its introductory game. So I respect Candace, I think it's a good fight, but the team comp is still a little questionable. Now up next, we finally infiltrate the Team Galactic building in Veilstone and fight Cyrus, who, yeah, still has a Sneasel. It's like, sure, he has a Honchkrow, but I just don't get why they're doubling down on him having bad fights and a bad team. And then right after this, you fight Saturn again, who also sucks, and it's like the exact same fight over again. It's kind of narratively cool, and I love that you release the 3 Lake Guardians, but I don't know about these fights, man. Now from here, we head to the top of Mount Coronet, which is the iconic Spear Pillar. And this draws us into the climactic storyline event of Pokemon Platinum. Over the course of the game, I haven't really been discussing their story very much. And honestly, that's kind of because I didn't understand Cyrus's goals. Every time I saw him, his dialogue was super vague and weird. And I just started thinking, like, this is a poorly written character, until I realized that that's like the intention behind him. The way that I've grown to interpret it is that he's just a raving lunatic. And when I finally realized that, I was like, oh, great, I love that. Like, it's simple, it's fine, it's everything I need in a Pokemon game. And at the very least, it's definitely a more compelling story from Archer in Heart Gold Soul Silver, whose only tangible action was to create radio waves that evolved Pokemon early and then run a over-leveled non-evolved Houndour in his final fight. Anyway, Heart Gold and Soul Silver is a story for another day, so subscribe if you do want to eventually catch that video. Now, before we get to Cyrus, we're greeted with actually what is a very cool double battle. Commander Mars and Jupiter are back for one last fight, and it's actually really fun. Now, it's a double battle with Barry where you're basically 12v6ing them, so it's not like high stakes, but their Pokemon are really good, and in a doubles format, I found myself extremely focused. So although I really struggled with the mid-game commanders, I found that this fight kind of put a nice bow on them as a whole. But it is after this that we finally get our supremely spicy storyline moment. I don't know how to explain this very well, so bear with me. So Cyrus activates or does something or other, and Dialga and Palkia come out, and he's like, I'm gonna control everything. But then the Lake Guardians are all like, nah, man, we're here to stop you. And in Diamond and Pearl, that actually works because Cyrus only pulls Cyrus didn't expect is there's this secret third dude named Giratina, and they're kind of like Pokemon Satan, like walking around, and there's all these crazy puzzles, and Giratina's flying around and being kind of like being. Eventually, we do all this things, wall walking. It's really cool. Anyway, we're about to confront Cyrus for Giratina, and he's like, yo, it's time to battle, except now I don't suck. Okay, it's been a long time since a vanilla Pokemon game has challenged me, so let me just walk you through this one. I'm doing all my fights with no items and in forced set mode. I go in blind, and leading Staraptor luckily get the advantage on his Houndoom. Except close combat isn't enough to one-shot, I get a burn and he full restores. Another close combat obviously does even less, and his flamethrower drops me in one shot. We then sit out Victoria holding a Quick Claw to Aqua Jet and take it out. Gyarados then comes out next. I'm feeling smart, so I swap out to Magnezone to make the most critical error of my whole playthrough. I've been joking on Team Galactic for like the last 2 badges straight, so the absolute horror I have to see Gyarados throw down an Earthquake is nearly indescribable. Cyrus has gone from being the most laughable character into kind of a god. Now, I also only brought 5 team members because I needed an HM slave to get to the top of Mount Coronet in the first place. So after a misplay on Empoleon coming out, I sack Big Doof and swap in Frostlass, which is a 4-shot to kill, leaving us with a sliver of health. We are now tied 3-3. Seeing the kill, Honchkrow comes out next, but I outspeed with Ice Beam, which unexpectedly is sadly not enough to kill. Fortunately, Frostlass goes down. Just kidding. Frostlass hits a 10% freeze to clutch. Thinking of Snowcloak Blizzard strats, I go to set up Hail, but wouldn't you know, Honchkrow gets a turn 1 Unthaw in the middle of a snowstorm. Frostlass goes down, it's 3-2 for Cyrus, and Leafeon is weak to everything left on his team. I send Victoria back out for the Aqua Jet kill, evening things back out 2-2. Weavile Crobat versus Empoleon Leafeon. Victoria stays in, and after a brutal mauling, manages to take out Weavile with just 20 health remaining. 20 health is all that remains between a brutal mauling to Leafeon and getting sent back down to the bottom of Mount Coronet. All I can do is sit here and pray for a Quick Claw Blizzard. I don't hit it, but unexpectedly, its Air Slash is not enough to kill through Empoleon Steel typing. We go for the Blizzard, but Crobat survives in the red. We're both now in kill range, but Victoria has the priority move Aqua Jet. So we have one path to victory. We click Aqua Jet, and Cyrus hits a full restore. That's game. Is it cool if we switch it up for a sec? I'm just thinking like a epic Pichao run and bun sort of monologue. I started making YouTube videos in 2007 at just the age of 11. And in 2014, when I was just 18, I reached my childhood goal of turning YouTube into a full-time career. That first successful channel was called the SmithPlays, where I made Call of Duty zombie videos. And there was something about that era of my career that just felt like absolute magic. I was really successful, but as a content creator, there's more to it than just views, at least for me. And for me, that magic was being successful, making content that was extremely meaningful to me, while also feeling like I was part of something bigger. Now, in 2020, I retired from zombies officially and moved over to Minecraft. And similar to my brief stint as a Fortnite creator, I was making a lot of people happy with my Minecraft videos, and I really do like that game. But after a few years of that, I just got to the point where I always seemed to end up. I'd done everything I wanted to in the space and hit a point where I just felt like I was churning out content with no higher long-term goal. And so at the end of 2022, I started a Pokemon channel with the simple goal of creating content that was, above all else, meaningful. I ended up walking into making 3 Pokemon ROM hacks, and in the creation of that, I somehow stumbled back into that magic once again. Something I hadn't felt in years was back. And as the legacy project finished, I knew I had to do everything I could to hold on to that magic. So at the start of 2025, I did what at this point I think I do best. I followed the passion and I moved on to start making videos full-time for this channel. I turned to the one game that I hold closer to my heart than zombies. The first game I ever played as a kid when I was 6 years old. Now, as I was going through this run, time was ticking on, the game was slowing down, and I gotta be honest that I was having some doubts about all of this. Doubt started creeping in that maybe I had made the wrong decision. I can only describe it as this sense of dread that no matter what game I make videos about, it's only going to be a job now. And sitting here 11 years later at the age of 29, I can't help but wonder if that's just kind of the reality of growing up. I think there is some truth to the idea that the magic wanes as you get older, but I really do think that we have agency to hold on to that spark. And this Cyrus fight was the first moment in reminding me of why I chose Pokemon. I just gotta, or that doesn't kill maybe? Ah! Come on, dude. Oh my God. I think we got it. Holy shit. No. Dude, for the content world. No! Dude, you could not have written that. Oh my God, dude. Oh my God. That was like the best fight of my entire life. And just like that, my faith in Pokemon Platinum is restored. We encounter and capture Giratina and start the final leg of the journey towards fighting Pokemon's greatest trainer, Badge 8, a much-needed calm before the storm. Experiencing the Distortion World with Cynthia is narratively an incredible decision. And being accompanied by the region's strongest trainer, there is a realism to the event that most games are completely lacking. Sure, the player kind of just saved the world, but let's be honest. If we can beat Cyrus, so can Cynthia. But this act of Cynthia has her tacitly recognizing your potential. She's choosing to let you handle the situation, and in doing so, almost recognizing you as a trainer that someday might be her equal. Compare this to Lance and Johto, which has a very similar vibe, helping you clear the rockets. This moment falls narratively flat, however, because Team Rocket is such a joke. Then you have the events of Pokemon Emerald, which are on the complete other end of the spectrum. Wallace, the champion of Hoenn, asks a 12-year-old child where the Sky Pillar is, and as you're climbing towards the dragon god of the sky and only hope for humanity, dips out halfway through the trek. This climax is the perfect balance between the two. It serves to elevate your relationship with the champion to a degree not seen since Pokemon Red and Blue. And so despite the 8th gym leader being a complete and utter joke, I can't help but think it was a decision for the best. I was almost able to solo Volkner with a Gabite, but it was a palate cleanse. Difficulty-wise, this fight is between a rock and a hard place, and it almost felt right to just make it kind of easy, get a breath in before what's coming next. From here, we make it through Victory Road, evolve Gabite, finally into Garchomp, and as we're about to step into the league, we get our final fight with Barry. And I think this fight does a really good job of stepping that pressure up once again. He's certainly no blue, but compared to Silver and May's horrific final teams, it's just nice to see a rival that actually pressures you. As a character as a whole, I can see that a lot of How's influence came from Barry, and I wouldn't say that he was my favorite rival, but I think he was a much needed balance to the seriousness that some of the game's darker themes posed. Part 9. The Elites of Sinnoh. Sinnoh's final challenge is the most well-scaled E4 to date, and possibly ever. Gen 1's Elite 4 difficulty is all over the place. Gen 2 scales better, but its trainers are just not linear in difficulty. Gen 3 is an absolute mess. Gen 5 is exceptional, but the equal level caps kind of hurt the difficulty curve. Gen 6 has Diantha, while Gen 9 has Gita, and so that leaves you with just Gen 7 and 8 that really rival the consistency of Sinnoh. But the reason that Sinnoh rises above all others is that you are now barreling towards the end of the hallway, with Cynthia looming larger after every fight. We start with Aaron, who is an excellent placement for the bug type, which has always been an underperformer. I can imagine players of past generations going into this fight thinking, whoa, bugs just got good. Every Pokemon serves its place, and the decision to use Drapion, which is not even a bug type, is both so bold and clever that after everything we saw in the mid-game, I'm questioning whether Game Freak is just an absolute genius and everything was intentional. This is a great start to the Elite Four, being not too difficult, but raising the pressure very well. 3 fights to Cynthia. Bertha is the second E4 member, a ground specialist, and her 4x weaknesses are unfortunately to grass and the ever-common water type. What's worse is that her ace is one of those Pokemon. It's awesome to see Rhyperior make an appearance, but is sad to see it go down so easily. Sandstorm's buff to raise special defensive rock types is definitely a saving force for her. Her Sandstream Hippowdon saves the fight from being too easy, but Bertha just isn't that standout to me. Ground always makes for an at least respectable Elite Four though, so I was satisfied here. 2 fights to Cynthia. Unfortunately, I gotta stop the compliments at Flint. Flint feels so similar to Volkner, but he is just at the wrong place at the wrong time. In Diamond and Pearl, he only had 2 fire types, but he now gets a full team. This makes him more true to his typing, but full fire teams are really bad. Sure, it was with the Garchomp, but I was able to 5-turn this man by clicking A 5 times in a row. Realistically, what this guy needed was a Drop Ninetales, which just didn't exist at the time, because without Sun, which he wasn't able to get up, there's just nothing that he was able to do, and I expect more from an Elite Four member. 1 fight to Cynthia. Fortunately though, Platinum makes a hard shift in difficulty for Lucian, who I would actually like to propose is the hardest 4th Elite Four member in the series. By Gen 4, Psychic isn't even that overpowered anymore, and yet Lucian puts on a masterclass that makes even Gen 1 Sabrina blush. The type variation here is amazing. Pure Psychic Mayim reminds us all what a menace its screens are. Bronzong is a ridiculous wall, and when Espeon, a Pokemon with 130 special attack and 110 speed, is the least interesting thing on your team, you know you cooked. His Escalade is a terror. Stone Edge, Psycho Cut, Leaf Blade, and Drain Punch, they did not hold back for this thing. But I gotta be honest, what was the most satisfying moment for me and the happiest that I felt through this whole league was seeing the Zamp come out. There were other options they could have added in here, but it felt so respectful to put Zam on this team. We haven't seen Alakazam on a team since Kanto, so this was a play that just left me very satisfied. But wait, what's that? Do you hear the soft sound of a classical piano? Of course you do. You've been hearing it for some time now. From the moment you started your game, you heard something. But it wasn't all that clear at the start. You could hear it from a place far, far down a hallway. And with every fight you passed, it grew the faintest bit louder. But But now, with the Elite Four completed, you are ready to stare face to face with the threat that's been looming over you all game. The pinnacle of challenge, the highest rite of passage for any Pokemon fan, and the most notorious trainer in the entire Pokemon franchise. It's been a long time since a vanilla Pokemon game has really challenged me. These games were made for kids after all, but I'd be lying if I said I wasn't craving the sweet, sweet challenge of a serious Pokemon fight. Pokemon Platinum and Generation 4 are not perfect. The fights of the early games, such as Rourke, Commander Mars, Jupiter, Gardenia, and Fantina, draw you in with the premise of the greatest challenge a Pokemon game could ever offer. And that promise is broken in the mid-game. The fights become easy, boring, and worst of all, repetitive. Maylene is a step down, Crasher Wake is a further fall, the letdown of Cyrus's incredibly high expectations sting. Barry alone cannot face the burden. And as the mid-game wraps up, the player is faced with the most pathetic fight of all, Byron, a trainer susceptible to being 3-turned. But even at these low points, where I felt like my hope and passion for Pokemon was waning, there was always that sound of a distant piano at the end of a hallway encouraging me on. See, as I began climbing those stairs to my final challenge, I realized that what I've been describing as a looming threat is actually the thing that's been driving me this whole time. This was, in fact, the pressure that I needed for a fun playthrough. No matter how bored or how frustrated I was with a game that frankly has a lot of missteps, there was one trainer that was always there to keep me from getting too comfortable. And this forced me to care. For the first time in so long, this mere presence meant that I was meticulous with my team building. And in that, something happened that I truly have not experienced since I was a child. When I chose Piplup, I was telling the truth that I picked it for its cool typing. But I also think that Piplup might be the cutest starter Pokemon of all time. Steel Water ended up being a little bit weird. I was never prepared for a weakness against ground, and I was always expecting a resistance to fire, but that's just my analytical Pokemon nerd brain talking. Honestly, I don't really care. Piplup is adorable, Prinplup isn't even that bad of a mid-stager, and Empoleon is one of the coolest final stage designs ever. Also, the fact that I got a female one, which made her the Empress, like that's just so badass. Victoria gave me some of my most incredible Pokemon clutches ever, and I did not regret my decision for a second. And I didn't just keep Staraptor because it had a good stat profile and ability. I was so beyond that place of numbers and theory when I started this journey. Now, Boreas was one of my closest companions, the most reliable of Pokemon that I could always count on to deliver massive damage and clutch out wins. Then there's Garchomp. What had been a second stringer my entire game had finally grown into its iconic pseudo-legendary form. But Madeeb was so much more than just a pseudo-legendary. This was another Pokemon that had been with me since almost the start of the game. And watching this thing come into its own, I just felt like a proud parent. Now, Magneton is definitely the Pokemon I had the most experience with before this playthrough. I've ran it in Kanto, I've ran it in Johto, along with a handful of times through Hoenn, and Magneton is a Pokemon that I already love. You can't get Magnezone in Heart Gold Soul Silver, and I've never got to use it before. And getting to witness the absolute insanity that was Mjolnir, the Magnezone, was honestly just a thing of beauty. And then there's Frostlass. Arame was a late game addition, but she didn't feel like a last minute soulless add-on. I would actually say it was the opposite, which is very rare for my Pokemon playthroughs. Arame felt like the piece that was always missing to complete this team of 6. It's such a unique and cool Pokemon that I had always kind of disregarded just because of my disdain for for its cousin Glalie. But it's got incredible typing, a cool design, and it brought me so much comfort knowing that it would be there with me to weather the upcoming storm. But of everyone on this team, it was my relationship with Leafeon that was the most unexpected. I feel weird because unlike most people, I've never really identified myself with having a favorite evolution. And what I first looked at as a statistical power spike for the early game turned into what I can now say is easily my favorite evolution of all time. I always looked at its grass typing and weird stylistic design as being inferior and less fun to the other evolutions, but something just completely flipped over this run. Its wood elf design is so charming, and I feel like design-wise, it's almost the most standout of the group. Its quirkiness, which I once had a bit of disdain for, ultimately shifted into the reason I like it the most. When you glance at its profile and typing, it's so easy to overlook, but after playing a game with it, Leafeon is now genuinely one of my favorite Pokemon of all time. And so the question that I asked myself as I passed through the final door and finally heard the piano in all its crispness was, what is it about Platinum that makes it so beloved by the community? And as an outsider, I think I can finally answer that question. For the first time ever, players are not subject to the whims of only selecting Pokemon that get the right moves or are available before the postgame. I mean, sure, Platinum is still missing some Pokemon like Mismagius and Honchkrow, but the number of good options you have in this game are so beyond the level of anything we ever saw before this. Now, we need to acknowledge that this in part has a lot to do with Johto. Generation 2 introduced a ton of baby and single stage Pokemon that weren't very good. Sinnoh was then able to stand on the shoulders of Johto's contribution and give these Pokemon final stages. Sure, we all know the Staraptor, Garchomp, Luxray, Roserade, and Fernape core, but unlike past games, players aren't forced into that decision. Any starter in Platinum is great, and sure, Staraptor is crazy, but I had a very tough time letting go of the prospect of Togekiss. Nothing is a Garchomp, but there's a ton of other great ground types. As for electric types, I could have gone with Luxray, Jolteon, even Electivire, and yet the Pokemon I went with was just as good as any other. Ice type may have come late, but Frostlass was competing to be picked between a Mamoswine, Weavile, and an Evolution. And while I didn't go with a fire type, the options are incredible here as well. You've got Infernape, Magmortar, and Houndoom's first ever true appearance. Pokemon Platinum is a great game because for the first time in the series, the player has actual choice in their team building. There's no typical guiding hand that is forcing you into the same consistent team time after time because every Pokemon has potential. Well, almost every Pokemon. But there's still one more facet that ties this all together. Everything we've discussed today wouldn't matter if it wasn't for the iron-like grip that one trainer holds over the Sinnoh region. It is the impending threat that all players are forced to navigate, which makes the significance of your team members feel so much greater than any game before it. You're not building up to a Nepo Baby rock collector or a Hyper Beam loving bird keeper. You are building a team to fight the most iconic, notorious, and arguably hardest trainer of all time. The sheer weight of that causes you to develop such a bond with your Pokemon that truly took me back to the feeling I had of playing Pokemon as a kid. And it's through her that I have to attribute a newfound passion for Pokemon. For no matter how I felt playing Pokemon Platinum for the first time, she has been there, ever present, staring me down the long end of the hallway. To new players, the sound of a distant piano echoes the impermanence of all playthroughs. Its haunting notes reveals the truth that even the most prosperous must decline. Cynthia is, however, the exception. Dude, holy shit, I have chills right now. This is crazy. Just Surf here. Perfect. That's probably its strongest move. If this is all Victoria does for this fight, I'm happy. Shadow Ball. That's fine. And we bait out a full restore. I think Force Surf will be enough. There's nothing else Victoria can do unless she gets like a Quick Claw Ice Beam on Garchomp. There it is, man, in all its beauty. Okay, two trains of thought. I know this is an Earthquake, chat. So in my opinion, it would make way more sense to swap in, get the Intimidate on it, like a free Intimidate for no damage. It could be a Brick Break. I think you guys are right though. I think you're right. I think it's Staraptor. Because even a -1 Brick Break, right? We can take that. Please, Earthquake. Please show me the Earthquake. Let's go. I think a Garchomp will outspeed me, right? I think it outspeeds. I think it's 150. I'm leaning hard swap to Victoria. I'm thinking that Victoria can't do anything else. I think I gotta go. Oh, Dragon Rush. Wow. That's the thing. If I get the Quick Claw activation, I'm big up. But I could just grab another Intimidate with Staraptor. I think I want to just go back to Staraptor. All this is about getting Frostlass in safely. Okay. Do I just go to a Raume now? Or U-turn? I think that's it. We U-turn. Flamethrower. That's fine. We live. Dude, this Frostlass, like this, our entire team, I feel like, has been built for this moment. We've just been thinking, how do we kill Garchomp? Chat? There it is. There it is. And there it is. Okay. Okay, Lucario. Just like, what could this move be right now? Like, it's probably a Steel move or like Darker Ghost. Okay, let's do it. Ice Punch? Please don't. Please don't. Stone Edge. That's fine. Beautiful. Okay, and then it's just an Earthquake. You're so dead. Back to basics, baby. Oh, there's the Ice Beam user. There's the Ice Beam user. Okay. I think it's just Magnezone. All right, buddy. We've been expecting very big things of you, Magnezone. I think when you got a Magnezone with a Magnet and Thunderbolt, you just gotta go with the big damage move. And I outspeed because it definitely just used Mirror Move. Yeah, Mirror Coat. Yeah. 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 Fair enough. Leafeon, just been an honor, soldier. Let's go. Dude, Leafeon might now be my favorite evolution. Probably just Victoria. Steel type. Well, that did more than I thought. I'm assuming we get outsped. I've asked too much of Victoria to ask for another Quick Claw. She's done her duty. So it's an Aqua Jet. Oh, Shockwave. Okay. Victoria, it has been an honor serving with you. Here we go. The specs. Yeah. Dude. Also, like, such a Frostlass fan. Ooh. Okay. Oh shit. That was a cheeky crit. That was a cheeky crit for sure. Mac. Ooh, that's gross. Why would you do that, Cynthia? This is her last full restore. I'm assuming she only has 2. Half. Ooh, shit. Again, this is Silk Scarf. So this is 120. Like, maybe slightly less than 102. So this is 120 before stab. They're doing the same. It might do a tiny bit more, but like based on my like 5 damage different. Ooh, though it has Shockwave. So pivot Garchomp and then just take it out. Weird play. I think it's a Dragon Claw, yeah? Obviously. Now this should kill, right? It might not. Yeah. What does this do? Okay, I think that's it, guys. So return. And as long as this is a Roserade. Okay, thank God. Roserade, hi. I never picked you for my team because you're overused. And so instead, I chose the other overused early Pokemon. And that is Staraptor. Boreas, it has been an honor serving with you. Ladies and gentlemen, that is Pokemon Platinum.